There is a moment happening in tennis right now that nobody saw coming. Not like this, not this fast. And if you have even glanced at a WTA scoreboard in the last few months, you already know the name that everyone is buzzing about. Because what is unfolding around this 21-year-old from the Philippines is not just a good season. It is the kind of story that makes you stop scrolling and actually pay attention. And as she steps onto the grounds of the Cincinnati Open this week, she is doing it with an entire country roaring behind her. So let us slow down for a second and really talk about what is happening here. Because this goes far past a good win-loss record, this is a full-blown cultural moment, the kind sports gives us maybe once a decade. And Alex is standing right in the middle of it, so picture this. You walk into an arena expecting the usual polite tennis crowd, the golf claps, the hushed murmurs between points. And instead, you get flags snapping in the wind, red and blue and white and gold everywhere you look. Chants rolling down from the upper deck that sound more like a national team qualifier than a hard-court match in Ohio. And that is the environment Alex has built around herself, match after match, city after city. From the manicured lawns of Wimbledon, to the courts of Washington, to the streets of Toronto, and now into Cincinnati. And the wild part is this reaction is not manufactured hype. It is not a marketing push from her team. It is organic. It is real. And it has completely caught the tennis establishment off guard because nobody quite expected a player from a country with almost no tennis pedigree to suddenly command this kind of following on North American soil. But here we are, and it is only getting louder. Now, before we get lost in the emotion of it all, let us ground this in the numbers. Because the noise around Alex would mean absolutely nothing if the tennis was not backing it up. And make no mistake, the tennis is elite. She has fought her way into the top 20 of the world rankings. A ranking that would have sounded like fantasy talk for a Filipino player just 2 years ago. And she did not sneak into that number through a soft draw or a lucky run. She earned it by going through legitimate murderers row after murderers row of opponents. She recently claimed her first ever WTA 500 title in Washington. And the list of players she had to get through to lift that trophy reads like a highlight reel of the sport. She took down Naomi Osaka, she got past a battle-tested veteran in Alina, and then in the final, on American soil, in front of a crowd that should have been rooting for the hometown favorite, she outlasted Jessica Pegula, arguably one of the toughest competitors on tour. And she did it with a calm that honestly should not belong to someone this young, big serves, clean ball striking. And a composure under pressure that made her look like she had been doing this for a decade rather than a couple of years. That win alone would have been the story of anyone else's season, but for Alex it was just the beginning of an even bigger stretch. Because straight from Washington, she rolled into the Canadian Open and kept the momentum alive, stacking win after win until her streak hit 7 matches in a row before finally running into a buzzsaw named Belinda Bencic in the 4th round. And now, fresh off that run, she arrives in Cincinnati carrying a 17 seed. And that number matters more than it might look at first glance. Because that is the highest seeding any player from the Philippines has ever held at a WTA 1000 event. Ever. In the entire history of the sport. So when you hear people say history is being written right now, this is not an exaggeration. This is literally happening in real time. But here is where the story gets a little heavier, a little more complicated, because success at this speed always comes with a price, and the price Alex is currently paying is written all over her schedule. She has already logged 56 matches on tour this season, and to put that number into perspective, that is more matches than Jessica Pegula has played, more than Alina has played, more than former top players like Mira Andreeva, and more than a Grand Slam champion like Elena Rybakina. Alex has entered 21 tournaments this year alone. And remember, we are only in August. This is not a full season total. This is barely 2/3 of the calendar. And that pace, as thrilling as it has been to watch, is exactly the kind of pace that breaks players down physically and mentally. And you could actually see the cracks starting to form in Toronto, because while she extended that win streak to 7 matches, anyone watching closely could tell something was off. Her legs were heavier, her movement was a step slower than usual. And by the time she ran into Bencic in the 4th round, the tank was simply empty. Bencic, who is one of the smartest tacticians on tour, sensed the fatigue immediately and pounced, closing out the second set with a merciless bagel to end the run. And it was a jarring reminder that even the most electric young talent in the sport is still human. Still has limits, still needs rest just like everybody else. And this is not just fan speculation either. people close to her camp, including her own uncle, have publicly voiced concern about how packed her schedule has become. The question hanging over this entire stretch of the season is simple. Is she pushing too hard, too fast, without giving her body the chance to reset? Because unlike a lot of her peers who have deliberately taken weeks off here and there to recharge, Alex has barely paused. She has already locked in commitments for Cincinnati, the US Open, and even the Singapore Open in September. And when you are stacking that much tennis, on top of travel, media obligations, and the added emotional weight of representing an entire country every single time you step on court, the fatigue is not just physical, it seeps into everything. And that brings us to the draw she is walking into in Cincinnati, which honestly looks less like a bracket and more like an obstacle course designed by someone who wanted to make her earn every single round. Thanks to a string of late withdrawals, she was bumped up to that 17 seed, which does grant her a first-round bye, but do not mistake that bye for an easy path, because tennis analysts have already flagged this draw as one of the toughest imaginable, littered with Grand Slam champions at nearly every turn. After the bye, she is projected to face either a qualifier or a solid clay specialist in the second round. But from there, the road gets brutal fast. A dangerous ball striker looms in the third round. A Wimbledon champion could be waiting in the fourth. A likely rematch with Pegula sits in the quarterfinal picture. And beyond that, the semifinal and final rounds are stacked with names like Sabalenka and Goff, the kind of gauntlet that would test even a fully rested, fully healthy top 5 player, let alone someone who just played a taxing 3-set battle in Toronto on legs that were already running on empty. And here's the part that might surprise you. Some tennis analysts are actually saying that an early exit here in Cincinnati could end up being the best possible outcome for Alex. And yes, I know how strange that sounds, because as fans, we always want to see our favorite player win every single match. But when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, it starts to make a lot of sense. The US Open is the real prize. That is where legacies get built. That is where the biggest names in the sport get made. And Alex is already positioned to be one of the most talked about storylines walking into Flushing Meadows. She will be featured heavily in the promotional build-up. She will be doing extensive media. The spotlight is only going to get brighter. And if she grinds through a deep run in Cincinnati first, she risks showing up in New York already running on fumes, vulnerable to an early upset simply because her body has nothing left to give. Whereas a second or third round exit in Ohio, disappointing as it might feel in the moment, would actually hand her nearly 2 full weeks to properly recover, get off her feet, let her body reset, and walk into a Grand Slam fresh instead of depleted. And honestly, hearing her own words about what she plans to do after Toronto only reinforces just how self-aware she is about all of this. She mentioned taking a couple of days to just decompress before heading to Cincinnati, getting a haircut, taking care of her nails, doing the small, normal things that have nothing to do with tennis, maybe catching up with friends once she lands in Ohio, just trying to feel like a regular 21-year-old for 48 hours before the entire circus starts up again. And there is something genuinely grounding about hearing that from someone who is being talked about as the future of the sport. It is easy to forget in between the record-breaking headlines and the sold-out sections of flags that she is still just a young woman trying to hold on to a little bit of normal life amid all this chaos. But if there is one thing that truly separates Alex from a lot of other rising stars on tour, it is not just her game, it is the relationship she has built with the people who show up for her. This fan base is not sitting quietly in the stands. They are locked in, emotionally invested, part of the match in a way you rarely see outside of a World Cup atmosphere. And when she lost that tough battle in Toronto, she did not just grab her bag and disappear down the tunnel the way a lot of players would after a tough loss. She stopped. She turned back toward the crowd. She waved. And as she walked toward the exit, she actually turned around again, walking backward for a moment just to wave one more time before finally heading off the court. And the fans erupted, not because she won, but because of the respect in that gesture. And when reporters later asked her about the incredible level of support she gets on the road, her answer was almost disarmingly humble. She basically said that she feels like just one small piece of a much bigger picture. One drop in an ocean of Filipino pride, that she works hard to represent her country well and takes real pride in doing so, but that the stadium was full of people doing the exact same thing in their own way, which she said says everything about the kind of community they are and how deeply they show up for one another. And that single answer honestly captures the entire phenomenon better than any stat sheet could, because she does not see herself as some untouchable superstar standing above the crowd. She sees herself as an extension of them, one voice among many, telling the same story of pride and resilience. And that is exactly why the flags keep showing up, why the chants keep echoing through these arenas. It is not only about the tennis, it is about visibility. About an entire community finally seeing themselves reflected on one of the biggest stages in global sport. And even her opponents have started to take notice of just how real this connection is. Bencic, the very player who ended her run in Toronto, openly acknowledged afterward just how difficult a matchup Alex presents. Not only because of the deafening crowd support, but because of her lethal game as a left-hander. Bencic actually pointed out that beating her extended a personal streak against left-handed opponents, calling the whole matchup a genuinely tricky one. And that kind of respect from a seasoned veteran tells you everything you need to know. This is not a flash in the pan. This is not a feel-good story propped up by hype alone. The locker room knows Alex is the real deal, and that respect is earned point by point, match by match. So where does all of this leave us as Cincinnati gets underway? We are watching a genuinely pivotal stretch in a young career. She has already checked off the boxes that used to feel impossible. A career-high ranking, a marquee title, statement wins over some of the very best players walking the planet right now. The real challenge from here is not proving she belongs. She has already proven that beyond any doubt, the challenge now is sustainability. Managing the physical and mental toll of a schedule this demanding so that when the lights come on in New York for the US Open, she has something left in the tank to actually compete for the biggest prize in the sport. And for the fans who keep filling these stadiums, the mission does not change no matter what happens in Ohio. Show up, be loud, wave those flags, give her every bit of energy needed to push through the exhaustion. Because whether she lifts a trophy in Cincinnati or takes an early exit to protect her body for New York, one thing is already undeniable. She has already won something bigger than any single tournament this year. She has captured the attention and the hearts of a global community. She has given a country a reason to gather around a sport it never used to follow closely. And she has shown a whole new generation of young athletes back home that where you come from does not determine how far you can climb. So now it is your turn. How deep do you think she can go in Cincinnati with a draw this brutal? Do you side with the analysts who think an early exit might actually be the smarter path toward a healthier US Open run? Or do you think her competitive fire is simply too strong to let her tap out early no matter how tired her legs might be? Drop your predictions down below. I read every single comment, and this community always brings the most thoughtful takes on this story. If this deep dive kept you hooked, go ahead and hit that like button. It genuinely helps push this story out to more people who need to see it. And make sure you are subscribed with notifications on because we are going to be tracking every single match. Every single milestone all the way from Cincinnati through New York and beyond. This is one of the most compelling storylines women's tennis has produced in years. And it is only just getting started. Thank you so much for watching. And I will catch you in the next one.